we're going to use a pygmy meter to measure the flow of this creek now. So inside the pygmy meter box, we have the meter. Now, when we're just storing it, we store it with what's called a traveling pin, which is a blunt pin. So to use it, we unscrew this little screw, just a little bit, take out the traveling pin, and put in a sharp pin, which runs more frictionlessly, runs more smoothly. Now, our quality assurance, quality control check on this is that we blow a big breath onto it and we want it to spin for 30 seconds without stopping. So we're going to check it, okay?
It goes. It does go.
All right. So now we put our pygmy onto the wading rod. This pygmy is missing the top bolt, so we're just going to have to be really careful that it doesn't fall off. But you put it on and you want the axis of the pygmy to be up and down. So now we're going to set up where we're measuring. Yep, that's okay. So we're going to measure across the bottom of this run right here. And so we're going to set up our measuring tape. One side of our tape is in decimal feet and one side is in feet. So we're going to make sure that our side that's in decimal feet is up.
I spin it.
So we're going to run this line all the way across the creek. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure our edge of water. We're going to start over here just because that's the way I ran our tape. So our edge of water right here is at 13.05 feet. So we'll go ahead and write that down. So now we're going to pick where we're going to take our first measurement. And we basically want to do, this is a very small creek and it's flowing very, very slowly. So we're going to try to do probably about 10 measurements across here. In a larger creek or one with more flow, we would do 15 to 20. So I'm going to just set up here at 14 feet. Then I'm going to slide myself down and look at where the water is hitting on the rod to measure the depth of the water. So this rod has markings on it. Each triple marking is a full foot. The double ones are half feet. The double ones are half feet and the single ones are tenths of feet. So I don't want to tip the rod because that would give me an inaccurate reading. So I bend down and this is at 0.45 feet depth. So I'm going to write down 14 feet and 0.45 feet deep. I'm at 14 feet, my depth is at 0.45 feet, and so now I adjust my top setting wading rod so that this gauge that's on the top of the rod reads 0.45 feet. So at that point, my pygmy is going to be set at 60% down from the surface, 60% down in the depth. And now I take 40 seconds, I've got my watch, so I'm going to measure 40 seconds, and I'm going to count how many times my pygmy spins in 40 seconds. All right, so I'm going to get started.
Is it spinning? Is it spinning, Mama?
Very slowly. All right, so at the end of 40 seconds, I'm going to move to the next spot. I'm going to measure our distance along, 14.9. So we have our distance. We have our depth. We set our top setting wading rod, and we count our spins.
I'm going to set my left edge of water at 15.8 feet, and then I'm going to write that down.
Now I'm all done doing my measurement. I'm going to, again, replace the working pin with the travel pin.
How is it?
Store that back in our container. We'll put the blunt travel pin back in. It will take up all the friction of movement during travel. And I'll calculate my flow back at the lab.
We're now going to use an acoustic Doppler meter, which operates very similarly. There's a top setting wading rod, just like with the Pygmy. This is the top gauge on that, and a lever that helps you adjust the rod up and down to ensure that the meter is at 0.6 of the depth down from the surface, so 60% down from the surface. Within the setup, we have a handheld meter that is attached by a long wire to the actual acoustic Doppler unit. This Doppler has two arms, and it essentially tracks particles through a Doppler field between those two arms to measure the velocity of the stream. This is the handheld meter. First, we need to put batteries in it. We don't leave batteries in here because they tend to drain or corrode. So we're going to start out by refilling this. So these are just AA's. This unit takes 8 AA's. Different units will take different numbers of batteries. So we'll get those installed first so that we can set up this equipment. So I'm just going to screw the cover back on the battery case, and we'll be ready to go. Usually when we store this, we only store it with one screw in the battery case, and so I'm just going to put a second one in to secure it a little bit better for this demo. All right, so now that's got batteries in it, we're now going to install the Doppler itself onto the wading rod. So there's a set pin in here and a specific way that the Doppler goes on. So there's a flat top to the pin that goes in, and then a screw that tightens down on top of that to keep it installed on the wading rod. So we'll use the same screwdriver just to tighten that down. When we use this, those two arms of the acoustic Doppler essentially need to be facing straight upstream and downstream, or the line between them need to be facing straight upstream and downstream. So we'd set this up very similarly to the Pygmy in that way. So the handheld itself can mount to the wading rod. It just screws on. Sometimes it can be a little bit finicky. I'm going to get it set up here. One thing to keep in mind is that this handheld unit, the top unit, is not waterproof, and so we have to ensure that that stays dry while we're in the field. All right, so now that this is installed, we can use this in the stream. So we're going to ensure that the acoustic Doppler field, so the line between the ends of those two arms of the Doppler face straight upstream and downstream. We can adjust the level using that lever and the top setting weighting gauge. And then we will make sure that we can see the handheld. We're going to walk through the steps on the handheld itself. So we'll turn it on. You can press enter to enter the main menu. There are a number of system parameters that you can adjust, things like how long you measure for, and some system functions. Other things like viewing the data file, things about the battery data, raw data, the system clock, etc. To actually go through and measure, we're going to hit set data run. We'll set the file name. We're just going to use a filler name and go to accept that name. Except I've already used the name 123, so we're going to do another one. So let's do 234 this time. So we'll accept that name. So at each of we're now going to move into each station to set all of our details. So for our first station, our height's going to be 0. We're going to hit next station. This will be our left edge of water. So at this station, we need to set our location. So this is how far across the tape we are. So we'll be 2.5 feet across there, and our depth is 0. So we're going to then hit the next station key. So station 1 is the first place we're going to actually measure. So we'll set our location. In this case, we'll say we're at 4.1 feet across our tape, so just like the pygmy, and we'll set our depth. So let's say our water is 0.55 feet deep. Then we'll press measure. So if we're in the field, we're going to have our legs out of the way, and we're just going to hold still for 40 seconds. You'll see the countdown on this. And it's tracking the velocity of all the particles moving through that acoustic Doppler field. Right now, the acoustic Doppler is not in the water, so it's not measuring anything real right now. But we hold still, keep it in the water, keep that field pointed straight up and downstream, and keep our legs out of the way as we go through that countdown. So again, because this isn't actually in the water, there are some error messages, but we'll accept that measurement and it'll go on to the next station. So here we'll again set a location. It's going to suggest a location. We'll change it to our actual location, and we'll set a depth. And again, we'll press measure and wait for 40 seconds. Again, we've got errors, but that's to be expected because we're not actually in the water. We'll press enter and we'll accept that measurement. Now we're going to end our section, so we'll set our right edge of water with a location and a depth. Then we'll do calculate discharge, and it's going to calculate our discharge. We can then flip through all of the details of that run. So needless to say, it wasn't in the water, so we're not getting a real velocity or flow. but we can go through and find all the details for our run and then exit that. And from there, we can turn it off, or we could start another data run to track another site. When we're done for the day, we're going to make sure that we remove the batteries so we can store it for the next use. We'll put the back cover back on and set it up to be stored.